Of what we are doing here, so-called generation stage or creation phase, maybe I will ask a question because this is the kind of key and a point of it, so that we don't miss, so to speak. Sometimes we dive into the rituals or practice, then sometimes I'm not sure what we are trying to getting at out of this sadhana practice. What's the aim of the sadhana practice? When I can say I completed, I finished this sadhana practice. What's the, you can say, demarcation or definition of the creation stage sadhana practice? What's boiled down? If we say two.
We feel we have firmly established that we are Vajrayogini.
Good. That's one half of the equation. If we wake up in the morning as a Vajrayogini, no doubt of who you are. And that's the first part. That's called Gagel, means divine pride, or I translate sacred dignity. That's Vajra pride. What's the half of the equation? When we say two, divine pride and what?
So then I assume the other part of that is the view that my environment and everybody in it is also an expression of Vajrayogini.
Yeah, expression of Vajrayogini, but also more than expression, in a sense you can view, you can see the world, your world, this ordinary world, right? Looking at this, here, there, this is your mandala, your world, your divine sacred mandala, sacred outlook. So that's the half of the equation called clear appearance, or sometimes I translate the sacred outlook. So when you wake up in the morning, you are Vajrayogini, and you are in the world of Vajrayogini. Then that's just the beginning glimpse, right? Then stabilize. In a stabilized state of mind, which does not depend on circumstance. Only when you are in a good mood or when you feel something blissful, then you see that. No, even the worst circumstance, conventionally speaking, you don't doubt about that. You don't have a question about that. So you are completely transformed, who you are and the world who live in. So that's that you can say aim or goal of creation phase. Of course, if I divide more, I can say more about it. And course creation stage and subtle creation stage. But basically what I just shared is the goal. The reason I brought up is the creation phase is called the yoga of pretense or yoga of imagination. Tappe Nenjo, the Tibetan word, yoga of imagining. However, we are not pretending like a wishful thinking. I'm Vajrayogini, I'm Vajrayogini, oh, this is the Vajrayogini's world. Try to kind of convince ourselves onto one's own ordinary perceptions. We cannot do that. Children do right, like those cowboys or dolls playing like that. But for us, we are talking about a complete transformation. So we cannot slap divine pride or clear appearance onto ordinary self or ordinary perception and ordinary way of viewing appearances. We cannot do that. That's why it's so important to practice Tantra. Tantra, in this case, referring to this Idam practice, the deity practice with Mahamudra. Have to go together side by side. Of course, Mahamudra itself is Mahamudra. Mahamudra is like ocean. Then all different practice is a boat or ship. So without the ocean, ship doesn't move or boat cannot move. So, but the ocean is ocean. My point is this idea of Mahamudra realization have to go with this Idam practice, which leads to the two aspects I'm talking about. And maybe I'm gonna ask a question. What gives rise, what helps, or what actually necessary to really give rise to Vajra pride? Let me rephrase. What's necessary realization to come to this I am Vajrayogini, this Vajra pride, sacred dignity, or divine pride. I just said I cannot slap that idea, concept onto the ordinary me, Kandora, for example. Very specific question, I mean, technical almost. This one I want you to get it because this is the basis of Vajrayana practice. And I've been quite emphasizing in Dakinis Whisper, have to be make it more articulate and specific. And then we have to work with it. I'm looking for something very specific. What do we need? What gives rise to the, or assist, or necessarily at least glimpse to have this genuine divine pride?
I was kind of thinking about emptiness as well. But the other thing that I think is just this complete disidentification with who I think I am, sort of like renunciation almost.
Yeah, this identification is emptiness, right? Emptiness is not the thing. Emptiness is a negation, unfindability of that identification. That's we've been doing in Mahamudra Vipassana practice. We are trying to find a Kandora, for example. Where can I find? We could not able to find the thing like that we are talking about in terms of here, divine pride, emptiness of the self. Buddha created a very convenient nominal classification or distinction. The self, me, and other than me. For example, arms, even mind and eyes, those are called phenomena, dharma. So that term he used, another word is anything other than me, other than the self is called a phenomena. So emptiness of the self and the emptiness of the phenomena. Buddha talked about those things.
Here I am most of the time having this imaginary reality that's based on this whole huge pool of karma of, that I've sort of attached to. Then to be able to have that faith, to have that other imaginary reality, the one that's going to give you results, the one that's going to do positive things and not create suffering. And this is, I mean, they're both those dualistic realities that we have created, but really belief in the positive one, the one that is the whole reason for being a Buddhist, I think, yeah.
Like a red pill or blue pill, but then we are not really trying to choose one. Okay, let's choose the positive one. This because I was told this is true, more close to the reality. Buddha said that, or the lineage master went through this. I don't think we are doing that. I don't think that we are trying to convince ourselves to one reality.
I think at some point we see that they're of the same nature. That those two are not opposing, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, you can say nirvana and samsara. But when we say that nirvana is samsara, we are not really talking about the mush-posh kind of things. Here, right now, we are talking about this. Right here, right now, this body, one body, that's the Vajrayogini practice. We are not talking about the transcendent or going to the other transcendent world and kind of discarding samsara. No, but in order to realize samsara is nirvana, we need this. We are kind of started talking about this realization or glimpse into this emptiness. First, the emptiness of the self, right, that we started talking about. In Mahamudra, we've been doing an investigation. Is there any qualities or nature attached to or self-existing self, me, Kandora? Each of you can do this. Nothing other than being labeled or name, depending on all these other things. Not the self-existing me out here, in here, or you out there. Is it? So then when we take away or peel off all that does not, then what's left? Nothing left. So Kandora is just a label, name, simple lack a simple unfindability of this we thought that who we are or who I am, absent. That's what we are defining in our tradition. That's called emptiness, lack of self-existing me. Then upon that lack, simple negation, simple absent, then we can bring practice here. This really flowering of this practice of divine pride. This is not really metaphor, but for example, without the empty cup, we cannot pour the juicy tea here, right? If already cup is filled with this so-called ordinary perceptions, then we are trying to convince, whatever way, devotion, lineage, trust, and all those things, which we share quite a bit in our community. But then fundamentally, we have to come to this. Of course, we cannot be completely understand or come to deepest understanding emptiness. That's another matter, but then at least understanding that we need a glimpse or even just the intellectual understanding of this who and what we are is not self-existing entity, which is something we can identify. That's called ordinary perception in terms of self. And then suddenly we can arise as a Vajrayogini from emptiness. That's what that means. In the sadhana practice, you said something like, out of emptiness, I arise, spontaneously I arise Vajrayogini. So that's what means here. We are not really convincing ourselves Vajrayogini. That's part I want to kind of get it, especially as a beginner. Sometimes we feel, when I don't feel like Vajrayogini, then they try to work very hard. That's impossible. So that's why we really have to go side to side. Only Mahamudra practice then doesn't lead to the Vajrayogini Buddhahood. But then only Vajrayana technique without the basis of emptiness doesn't lead to Kechara. We do both. So that's in terms of self, right? Then how about anything other than the self called phenomena? A kind of strange translation, phenomena. But that's the translation. Earlier translator translated phenomena for sure. Same word as Dharma teaching. So for example, my arm, so that is a phenomena. Also Mahamudra practice, we started to investigate so-called external world and even internal appearances. We call appearances, like emotions, feeling, thinking mind, moving mind, and all these things. So in terms of phenomena, clear appearance, we are trying to come to see everything is that Vajrayogini's world, mandala, sacred outlook. So what do we need? We are talking about the sutra teaching. Yeah, Vajrayana, but it's more like a basic emptiness of phenomena. No? So Buddha gave two useful categorization: emptiness of the self and the emptiness of the so-called anything other than the self. That's really need to come to some kind of glimpse. That's why it's annoying, this annoying inquiries we do in Mahamudra external appearance, especially challenging. It's because we have so much solid identity out there, obnoxious person out there, nothing but obnoxious he is. All these things we need to really look into. Is that true? This clear appearance sit on the top of the emptiness of every other object in the world, your arms, your feeling, your body, your mind. So this is the quality of ordinariness that gets in trouble. So I also talked about that enemy in sutra level. What's the two enemies in sutra level? Two things we need to cut through. One is the self-cherishing, selfishness. I'm more important than others. Each of us deep inside, we have this habitual patterns. Then another one, the big one, so-called self-grasping. This identifying or the viewing things exist from its own side. And I'm existing from my own side. Things itself has this self-existing entity. So that's the belief, stubborn belief we have. So those are two other enemies in Sutra. Then what's the two enemies in Tantra in relation to what we are talking about here? Enemies means we want to cut through Tantra. So in other words, what do we want to cut through Tantric practice? Vajra pride, or the sacred dignity and the sacred outlook, those two things we want to achieve, right? Then what's that cut through? Vajra pride cut through the ordinary perception, right? Ordinary perception of who we are, who we think we are. Then second half of the equation, this clear appearance cut through this ordinary appearance. So those are two things, ordinary perception and ordinary appearances. Those are two demons, you can say, two enemies we want to cut through in Vajrayana. The reason is somehow in here, subconscious or sub-thought or everything is self-existing, existing from its own side. But Buddha says that's not true. But then it appears like that, no? Yeah. We cannot convince ourselves, Buddha says so, and just believe in that. Then if something happens, you can test yourself. If something in your life already self-grasping and get suffer, that's the place where practice comes in. And also we have all this undercurrent, you can say, sub-thought. I'm not divine. I'm not the holy. I'm just humans and this and that. So everything is not divine, just ordinary. I'm just ordinary. All this idea. Then we cannot slap that. Oh no, because of Tantra, it said I'm divine already. I'm awakened. So I try to believe in that. That's actually very hard work. Good luck. Yeah, so that's why the emphasis of the sutra teaching. Thing is this Ramrim teaching, sutra teaching we been studying and we continue to study. If we do that, then Tantra reveal itself. It's automatically. Of course, a term like a self-revealing, right? But that's what this means. Ramrim is called the common path. What's common? Common to Sutra and Tantra. We cannot skip that actually. Like the shortcut is Ramrim in a sense. We try to shortcut to skip the Sutra part. Okay, I'm gonna choose Tantra. I'm not gonna do the Sutra path or something like that. And then skip. Then no matter how many years working on this specific deities or try to achieve, unless you have a karmic momentum or prodigy, this karmic momentum from the past. But those people are very rare. We want to believe we are like one of those. Believe me, that's very rare. Even those great masters, even reincarnated masters, they start from beginning, continue this path. My point is this sutra teaching of especially focusing on that, of course, bodhicitta part, really establish, because without the bodhicitta, why we are doing this, right? The bodhicitta and this ultimate bodhicitta, emptiness, really pay attention, continue to work with that along with Vajrayana practice. So that's really enhance each other. And then beautiful, what you call that, we can taste the beauty of Tantra. Without that, very difficult. We have gonna have a lot of struggle. If we can really thinning this ordinary way of thinking about who I am, and also sort of what are they, I'm phenomena, the world. then that really helps. So I was talking about samsara and nirvana, right? So no samsara, no nirvana, that's also a phrase it's used. When we peel off the idea of this ordinarity, peel off this ordinary, this is called habitual patterns or the belief we have, stubborn, some are very stubborn, then everything becomes sacred. So again, this path journey could be said to removing this unveiling and more, along with this more active practice of sadhana. If this sacred word, unveil, no samsara, no nirvana, is the most beautiful, could be a very, very beautiful place. You don't need to go anywhere else. Even this is called Kechara, Dakini land, far away. Of course, there's a phrase like, take me to the Kechara land, or those things, Buddha pure land, those ideas. Paponka Rinpoche said, those are ideas. He said, everything is here, right now, with this body and this lifetime. One life, one body. We are talking about the Vajrayogini practice here, highest yoga tantra. So that's what the mean by no samsara, no nirvana. We don't need to travel somewhere else other than here. Another word, you don't have to die. Death is just a name, doesn't mean to us. You don't have to change the body. The result can be achieved in this lifetime. That's what the point of this practice. Then Paponka Rinpoche said, however, since many great texts discuss the paradise, like Buddha paradise, Buddha Pure Land, I've grown up in this kind of culture. Paradise is external, somewhere out there. So we should take that authoritative. Said, okay, the text talks about that, so we don't negate that either. We need to take responsibility in our own mind to be able to distinguish the figurative and the literal as well. In tantric practice or Buddhist teaching itself has this or different levels of teaching, like figurative or ultimate or deeper meaning or literal or more obvious meaning, those things. We have to really get into this. And Ramatsongkhapa is very big on this. The last text he composed is Tangye, very difficult one, but that one is talking about this point, to distinguishing the figurative from literal. As we mature more as a tantric practitioner or Buddhist practitioner in general, as we mature, and then we get started to appreciate this kind of Buddha's teaching, different levels of teaching. And also good thing in Tantra is this security mechanism attached to it. So it doesn't reveal, if you are not there, the figurative teaching doesn't show face, it's so to speak. That's actually a good thing. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about here, Serenang and Ngagel, two things, and the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of anything other than self. Those are the actually core, basic things. And Ramatsongkhapa really emphasized this. That's a good thing about Ramatsongkhapa's text and the teaching. He is so clear. He said, what's boiled down here, in this case, what do you boil down the creation stage? It is just two things. So he listed, just as I said, right? Vajra pride and clear appearance. That's it. Then if you are Vajra Yogini and in the Vajra Yogini world, you have reached the aim of sadhana. You can let go of sadhana. Sadhana is to get to that result.